Joshua chapter 1 and verse number 1. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord. How many know that sometimes before God does something greater than, some things in our life have to die? There have to be some conclusions before there can be some new stories written. After the death of the servant Moses, it came to pass that the Lord spoke to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant or servant, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now watch this. Now arise. Everybody say, get up. And go. Everybody say, get out. Go over this Jordan, and you and all the people to the land. Everybody say, possess it. Which I am giving them, the children of Israel. Every place God gives them a promise. In verse 3, the last verse we'll read. Every place the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given you as I said to Moses. In other words, this promise has been lingering in the atmosphere for a while now. But for whatever reason, it hadn't been claimed yet. For whatever reason, we hadn't stepped into it yet. But God says, you're about to get up, you're about to go, and you're about to step into something you haven't stepped into yet. I'm going to preach to you from this thought, the word of the day. God's got a word for us today that we're going to get up, we're going to get going, and we're going to step into and occupy the land that He has for us. If you believe that, somebody give Him praise one more time right now. Hallelujah. Oh, we worship you, Jesus. Come on, lift up your voice and invite Him to talk to you in the next few minutes of this service. Would you lift up your hands and your voice and invite Him to speak to you right now in the name of Jesus, Lord? I pray that you would talk to each and every one of us, God. Leave no one out. God, friend, foe, guest, God, member alike, Lord, I pray that you would talk to all of us, that you would speak to all of us, God. Help us to know you have a word for us today. In Jesus' name, everybody say amen. Amen. You can be seated in Jesus' name. How many know that we've got a heavenly Father that wants to give good gifts to His children? How many believe what the Word says, that God is not going to withhold any good thing from those who walk uprightly in Him? Now, I don't want this to be misconstrued. We don't believe any prosperity gospel or doctrine simply because there's no such thing in the pages of Scripture. I'm not preaching today that when God says I'm not going to withhold any good thing from those who walk uprightly. I'm not preaching that if you walk right before God, God's going to make everybody multimillionaires. But what I am telling you is that the blessing of God, the spiritual and sometimes intangible blessing of God will be on the life and every life that walks uprightly before Him, on every life that is pleasing to Him, on every life that doesn't just do what the pastor says, but that does what this book says. God says there's going to be a blessing on your life. We're part of a great church here today at the sanctuary. We have people in this church and families and leaders that for generations have walked uprightly before the Lord. And God has honored us, and God has honored us recently. God has put His favor upon our church. I've come today to preach to our churches past. I've come today to preach to our churches present. And I've come today to preach to our churches future. And I've come to tell you what we started this thing with October 16th is that the greatest days of the sanctuary are not in our rearview mirror. They are not behind us, but they are ahead of us. They have not passed us by, but they are awaiting our tomorrows. I'm preaching to every family and every believer in this room that it's a great time to be a part of the church. I like what Brother Mitchell said. You can get on the train or not. If you don't get on the train, it's your loss. The train's going to leave you at the station. But this train is going forward. This train, as the old songwriter said, is bound for glory. God has things in store for us that are greater than anything we have ever experienced in our past. This church stands as a beacon in the Quad Cities. This church stands as a light to those that are hungry and hurting. This church is made up of a group of individuals and a group of leaders that desire to minister to the real needs of people. I'm thankful for leadership in the church that models servant leadership. That's what Jesus was, and that's what we got to be. In fact, if you desire leadership, but you're not willing to serve people, let me just let you down gently right now. There will probably never be a place for leadership for you in this church. We're going to model servant leadership as Jesus modeled servant leadership. And I thank God for leaders that don't stand just to be served, but they are willing to get their hands dirty and wash the feet of others and serve the needs of others. I thank God for a congregation that has a heart to minister to the hurting and the broken in our world. I thank God that we stand on some biblical truths. We believe the truths of God's word. We believe, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, thy soul, thy mind, and thy strength. We believe that you must be born again of the water and of the Spirit, or you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. Why? Because it says it in the pages of this book. We believe that we're charged to have compassion and love and concern for our fellow man, no matter what they look like, no matter what they smell like, no matter what their political affiliation is, no matter what side of the tracks they live on, that we are charged to have compassion and love and concern for the people God puts in our path. We are charged to live a holy lifestyle. This church believes that we do our best. We're not perfect. We are not perfect. If you're looking for a perfect church, then you ought to keep on moving, because we are far from a perfect church. And even if the church was perfect, guess what? The pastor is pretty flawed. So it would still not be a perfect church. But we are a church that believes that we must daily strive to reflect the character of Jesus Christ. We're a church that believes we must live with a mission in focus, that we've got to have a mission in our daily life. I've got to have a mission in my mind. That mission is souls, and we are a church. Let me declare that we will not settle for second best. We are not looking for leftovers. We are not going to settle for second rate, second best, but we are striving for excellence. We are reaching for the very best things that God has to offer. I don't believe God intends to bless some church in some other city and give the Sanctuary QC his leftovers. I don't believe God intends to pour out his blessings somewhere else in the world and just give us whatever he's got left at the bottom of the barrel. But we're believing God for his very best gifts. We're believing God for the very powerful revival that he has for us. Our church has got some great days in our history. We've got some great days in our past. But we are not resting on our past successes. Nor are we blaming others for any future failures. This isn't a church where we're playing the blame game. Well, it's this one's fault or that. No, this is a church where we're going to stand up, accept responsibility, and say, God, we believe you have a promise for us that this church will be a beacon in the Quad Cities all the way till the rapture, all the way till the trumpet sounds, that we will be a light and a witness, a place for the hurting to come, a hospital hospital for those that are sick spiritually to be healed. That's what the sanctuary is. It's a place to know Jesus personally. It's a place to grow in Jesus purposefully. It's a place that you can show Jesus passionately in your own ministry. That's what the sanctuary is. If you believe it, give God praise. If you're thankful for it, clap your hands and lift your voice and give him praise. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. You can be seated. And when God is moving a people, when God is moving a church forward, he always allows them to walk through seasons that are different. Seasons of uncertainty. Seasons of trepidation or fear. Sometimes seasons of loss. Whoa, hold up, Pastor. Pump the brakes. You had us all excited talking about the future. Now you're saying season of loss. Woo. Isn't that another message? Nope. It's all the same one. Because in those seasons of uncertainty, there is always a word from the Lord. In those seasons where tomorrow is unsure, there is always a voice from heaven to give anyone who is listening direction, anyone to hear direction. Scripture says in the book of Joshua, Moses, the great prophet and patriarch, had just died. And the scripture says it very clearly. Moses is dead. After the death of Moses, this man who saw the promised land from a distance but was not permitted to go into the promised land. Moses was dead. What a traumatic event in the life of the people and the nation of Israel. Their honored, revered leader was now gone. What a traumatic moment. Their leader, the one who parted the waters, is gone. The one who prayed for them was gone. The one who interceded for them was gone. The one they leaned on, the one they put their trust in, the one who smote the rock, he wasn't perfect. He was gone. Now, what's going to happen with the people? Moses is gone. Aren't you glad that the story didn't end with Moses disappearing? But the word of the Lord comes to the people of God and to Joshua in this remarkable book that bears his name. And God gives him a word of the day. God gives him a specific word for that day. Moses has left them in a season of uncertainty and a season of loss. In fact, they had some 30 days that they stopped their pilgrimage. They stopped their progress and they wept and they mourned. It's an appropriate time to weep and mourn. But at some point, the uncertainty has to cease. At some point, the weeping has to be replaced with a word from God. At some point, the uncertainty has to be replaced with a bold, courageous faith that says there is still a promise ahead. And while Moses may not be around anymore, God is still leading his people into a promised land, into a promised place. Can I tell you, what those of you that have been around here a little while already know, our church has been through in recent years some seasons of uncertainty, some seasons of loss, some seasons of grieving, where you didn't know what was going to be next, where you didn't know what was going to come around the corner. You didn't know where God was going to take us. You didn't know how things were going to work out. Sometimes seasons of loss and uncertainty, they come as a surprise. They come out of left field. They come out of nowhere, and you don't even see them coming, and then you're left grieving, and you're left wondering, and you're left with more questions than answers, and you're left to pick up pieces, and some of you know what I'm preaching to right now. There's been seasons of uncertainty, and then even when we go into a time like COVID and all that happened in our world over the last 3 years, so much uncertainty and so much turmoil. It seemed like on every hand. Can I tell you, I stand here today as the pastor. God called pastor of this church. My family has been through seasons of uncertainty. My family, even before these last 3 years, walked through seasons of loss and seasons of uncertainty where we didn't know what was going to happen and how it was going to work out and what was going to be. And we knew something had come to an end, and there was a grieving and a loss, but we didn't know how everything was going to work out. But in those moments, if you walk uprightly before God, you can trust Him that He is always going to come through. He is always going to speak. He is never going to stay indefinitely silent in your season of suffering. And so God speaks to His people through the prophet Joshua, and He says, it's time to arise. Everybody say arise. He said, it's time to get up. You got to get up. You've been crying long enough. Get up. You've been weeping and mourning for too many days. Get up. You've been sitting around sulking about what went wrong. Get up. You've been grieving what should have been, what could have been, and all your unanswered questions. Get up. It's time to get up. God says it's time to lay down your grief. It's time to cease the questions that don't have answers. Their questions brought them low. Their confusion brought them low. If you don't give up, it's just a matter of time that you'll... Oh, my. If you don't get up, it's just a matter of time you're going to give up. That's why God let him grieve for a little while. And He said, all right, weeping time is over. It's time to get up. I wish you'd look at somebody near you and just shout it at them. I mean, don't hurt their ears, don't scare them, but just lift your voice at them and say, get up. Some of you have been waiting to yell at your spouse since they made you wait in the car an extra 5 minutes all morning. God said, get up. What causes people to stop? What causes people to pause? What causes people? It can be grief. It can be strife. It can be contention. It can be envy. It can be all kinds of tricks that the enemy uses to try to mess up the people of God. And so God says, get up. There's several reasons people don't get up. There's several reasons that individuals decline morally, that churches experience decline morally. Sometimes it's just a spirit of immorality. Sometimes God's a holy God. You can't live in immorality, and you can't hide immorality indefinitely and have the blessing of God. Sometimes it's a spirit of competition that gets in a church or in a person or in a family, and people are comparing this to that, and well, they're getting this and I'm not, and they're getting promoted and I'm not, and they're getting a position and I'm not. And I'm telling you, a spirit of competition will cease the growth in a church, and it'll cease the growth in a believer. A spirit of defensiveness sometimes will pause the growth. It's where we get defensive about things, and it's where nobody can tell us nothing. It's where nobody can correct us, and a pastor can't talk to us, and a leader can't correct us, and nobody can preach to us. Well, and we get stationary. We get stuck in those seasons. Sometimes it's a spirit of survival that gets us stuck, where we just got to survive. We're just barely going to make it. I tell you, when COVID hit, I hadn't even been pastor 6 months yet, and I'm calling my pastoral elders and saying, "What in the world do you do?" They're like, "Dude, we don't know. We've never been through this before. We don't even know what to do." But I'll tell you one thing the Lord told me in my spirit. It went counter to everything everything that you would expect, but the Lord said, get ready, you're about to grow. Get ready, you're about to expand. You're about to increase. And so you know what? I don't apologize for anything we did during COVID. I felt like we took considerable measures throughout. But you know what I also tell you is I decided right early on we are not going into survival mode where we're just going to barely exist and we're going to operate in fear. We're going to do what seems sensical to our leaders. We're going to do what we have to legally. We're going to do what we have to not ostracize our community that we're trying to reach. But we will not go into survival mode. We're going to believe God for a harvest and an increase. And God did it during that time. Sometimes a spirit of fear keeps people stuck. It gets people stuck down where they hunker down and man, they look at their circumstances and they're afraid of what could be next and what might happen and what could be. And I'm telling you, we're not going to live in a spirit of fear. I don't know what's going to come tomorrow. I don't know what's going to come next year in 2023. I don't know what's going to come in 2024. Somebody said, what about inflation? It's there. We all know about it, but I will not live in a spirit of fear, and I will not go into survival mode and live in a cave. God has given us a promise, and the word of the day is get up. If you want to see the promise of God, you got to get up. If you want to get the promise in your life, you got to arise. You got to get up, Joshua, and stand on the promise of God. My. Woo! I thank God for a church. I know I'm preaching a little all over the map today. It's all right. I know I'm preaching to a church that you have gotten up. I know maybe not everybody, but as a whole, this church has got up. This church has said, you know what? We're moving forward. We're not going to be stuck in the past. We're going to be stuck in past hurts or disappointments or failures, but we're going to get up. If you're here today and you hadn't got up yet, it's time. There's no time like the present to get up and let God move you forward. Can I tell you, when it's time to get up, God's always going to bring you a word. One of the most uncertain seasons of my wife and I's life and ministry. During this uncertain season, God started sending people to us out of the blue. God started sending people to us. Had a man walk up to me with a napkin. I still got it at home. I didn't bring it, but like a cloth napkin that was cut. And he wrote the word of the Lord. So the Lord told me to give this to you, that wherever you go and wherever your feet tread, God says he's going to covenant with you and he's going to bless you. And there's going to be a rain from heaven, and there's going to be a promise, and there's going to be a fulfillment. So don't sit frozen in anxiety about what's next. This was long before we were, I couldn't have told you where the Quad Cities was on a map. I'm just going to be honest with you. Had no idea. Now, if you'd have told me Moline, I would have said Illinois, I think. Don't hate me. Geography wasn't my strong suit necessarily. Davenport, I think I would have said Iowa. I don't know. Maybe I would have said Idaho. Who knows? Then somebody else came. I still got it. Looks like got a tear stain on it. Somebody gave me a piece of paper. A woman of God said, the Lord told me to write this down and give it to you. I'm talking about when it was time to get up. But we didn't know where. We didn't know what. And the Lord said, your feet have not, we hadn't even been, we'd never preached a service in this church. I didn't know you guys. You didn't know me. Some of you, when they announced, hey, we're going to bring this guy Levine in, you're like going to Google, like, who's Levine? What? No, I never heard nobody like that. Jesus I know, David Bernard I know, but who are you? And 3 years later, some of y'all are still saying, who are you? She wrote on the paper, your feet have not yet trodden where God has prepared a victory for you. Your definition of victory is based on your past exposure, experiences. But don't be afraid to go a place you've never been, because there is a God-sized victory awaiting you. I can tell. I don't have time to tell you about where we were. We were at a party with some friends, not like worldly party. Just for the record, it was like a Pentecostal party. We get together with some friends, and it was the week before this church would find out that there was a vacancy in leadership. The week before, and a woman of God who I trust comes up to my wife and she said, "I need to talk to you. I was in prayer for you this morning, and the Lord told me to tell you this. There is a shift happening somewhere in the country right now, and God is going to take you to the place where the shift is happening literally at this very moment, and it's going to be a place maybe you don't know, a place you're not familiar with, and I'll be honest with you, we were at a season of life and ministry where there were multiple options on the table. We were praying about them and closing doors and didn't feel right, and I had friends in my ear saying, "Are you crazy? Are you out of your mind? Why aren't you going there? Why aren't you taking that?" They said go. Why aren't you going? I didn't feel it. I didn't feel it. Felt just a pause. And in that living room that day, she said there's a shift going on somewhere in the world, right, somewhere in the country right now, and God's about to take you there. 4 days later, I got a call from a man, and he said, "You know what? I don't know why I'm telling you this, but he said the Lord told me to tell you to start praying about the Quad Cities." I had never heard about the Quad Cities. I didn't know anything about this place, but I'm telling you, when God says it's time to go, when God says it's time to get up, woo! Come on, I'm preaching to somebody. You may be frozen in fear and uncertainty, but if God's given you a word, it's time to get up. Quit sitting around and sulking over what you lost. It's time to get up and say, "Give me this mountain. This is my day. This is my time." I feel the Holy Ghost. But God didn't just say get up. Can I preach just a few more minutes? God didn't just say get up. He said get up and go. Because if all you do is stand, you're still stationary. But you got to be willing to step out in faith. You got to be willing to get up and go somewhere. You got to be willing to get up and change your life. You got to be willing to get up and get after some things. Sit down for just a minute. God tells him, get up and go. We find this 1,492 times, this word and phrase in the Bible. 1,492 times. The first time was when God looks at Noah and he says, get up and go. Noah, go and build an ark. Now, check this out. It's a cool little side note. When God was calling Noah into the ark, when the ark was ready, God says, the language is, he says, Noah, come into the ark, as if God himself is in there already. And then when he says, go from the ark, he says, get out, as if, hey, you got to be willing to move when God moves. You got to be willing to move from a season of suffering and grief to a season of growth and harvest and revival. You got to be willing to move to a season of sacrifice when God says go. You got to be willing to move into a season of growth or generosity, whatever it is, when God says go. You got to be willing to move when God says go. It's the call of the day. It's the word of the day. Arise and go. Get up and go forth. It's the call of the day for our church. We have sat in comfort and security long enough. We have rested on our laurels and our past victories long enough. I'm telling you, it's time that we come out of hiding. It's time that we get up. It's time that we go. It's time that we go forward in what God has for us. What are you saying? I'm saying if you were ever going to get involved in ministry, it's time to get up and go for it. It's time to get involved. If you were ever going to minister to the poor, now's the time. Get up and go for it. If you were ever going to be a soul winner, now's the time. Get up and go for it. If you were ever going to live generously, now's the time. Get up and go for it. If you're ever going to have a burden in your prayer life, now's the time. Get up and go for it. Too many people die short of God's promise because when God says get up and go, they sit and stay. You know what? I feel a little metal in the spirit right now. You know why some good ideas and good ministries die unfulfilled? It's because somebody gets the idea or the thought or the word and they never do anything about it, and they wait for somebody else to do something about it. It's time to get up. It's time to go after it. You may be saying, well, when is somebody going to help me fulfill my ministry? Well, maybe that's the wrong question. When are you going to help somebody else fulfill theirs? When is somebody going to come give me a place to do something in the church? That's the wrong question. When are you going to find a place to do something in the church? Well, am I meddling too much for a happy Sunday? When are you going to find a place to do something in the church? There's stuff anybody can do. Oh, I know there's people who they just want the pulpit. They just want the mic. They want the platform. They want the stage lights, right? You say, Pastor, really? I've heard of them sometimes. I may be here today, but let me tell you, my ministry started long before serving others. Before I ever had a microphone in my hand, there was ministry in a Sunday school class. Before I ever had a microphone in my hand, I was down on my hands and knees with a sander, refinishing the baseboards of the church at 15 years old. You're not too young. I said, you're not too young. And we didn't have Google. I had to go to an elder in the church and say, how do I do this? And he told me how. I said, do you have a sander? Yeah, you can borrow it. Have you ever used one? No. Let me show you how to not cut your fingers off. Where there's a will, there's a way, they say, right? It's time to get up and go after it. Don't wait to be used some other time. Before I was ever in a pulpit, God helped me fill up one beginner classroom and then two beginner classrooms until they had to give us another room to expand the classroom that we were filling up, and had to add more teachers because I had too many kids in my class as a teenager. I'm telling you, if you wait to get the limelight and the spotlight, it hopefully will never come. But you got to get up now and serve. You got to get up now and work. You got to get up now and sacrifice. You got to get up now and be involved. You got to arise and go. God said, get up and go to Jacob. God said, get up and go to Jacob. Get up and go to Bethel. And that was going to be a place of consecration. Somebody needs to get up and get back to consecration. God said, get up and go to Elijah. That was because he was going to meet King Ahab and get a victory. Somebody needs to get up and go. And there's a victory in it for you. God said, get up and go to Jonah. And it was because there was a Nineveh, a citywide revival that was going to happen. And if we'll get up and go after it, there is a citywide harvest that is waiting. Moses is dead, but Jesus is alive and well. Moses is gone, but Jesus still has a promise for his church. And so we have seen his promises begin to come to pass as our sanctuary. And it's holiday time, so we might be a little light in here today. But let me tell you, the church has been filling up. And God has been bringing people to the church on a weekly basis. New people coming to the church. Some of you are brand new here today. And you're a part of what God is doing. I don't believe anybody's here by accident. If this is your first or second time here, you are not here by accident. You may think it's just because so-and-so invited you or you just thought about it. But I'm telling you, I believe God put the thought there. And God put the invite there. And you're here by design of heaven. You are here today by design of heaven. And so we launched a campaign just on October 16th as we've been growing. And we've been studying behind the scenes for over 19 months what we can do to expand the facility and modernize the facility in the areas that we desperately need it, in children's ministry and youth ministry, in our sanctuary, in our foyer space, and all of these things. We've been working towards this, and we've been preaching, and we've been hearing about sacrifice and generosity and God God has been growing, and God's not done yet. As I said earlier, there's lots of these cards that have come in, but if you're still praying about it, you just get it in your time. If you're still seeking God, we had some already turned in this morning. You get it in your time. But God has been leading us into something that is greater than. And as I have said over and over again, when God gets done, we are not going to be talking about building updates. We're going to be talking about lives changed. We're going to be talking about families restored. We're going to be talking about miracles done in homes and marriages and healings and people coming to Jesus and finding God. That's what we're going to be talking about. But last week, we gave our pledges, and our church responded. And pledges are still coming in. But I know everybody's waiting. Everybody's wanting to know where we stand. You heard the vision, the goals that we cast. But everybody's wondering. And so next week, no, I'm just kidding. Are you ready for this? Are you ready for this? God never intended the church's greatest days to be something that we look back on. But no, God intends to do greater works in our generation than we have ever seen in a previous generation.